couldn't go to the event, so she's asking about childcare. And if any of you know me, which I don't think many of you will, my go-to response is, well, if you're willing to organize this thing, then you can do it, and we'll do it. I'll give you the money. Things I learned on the way. Don't do it yourself, because childcare and law is very, very painful. Find professionals. Always find professionals. I don't want to be responsible for other people's children. You do not want to be responsible for other people's children either, trust me. Also vet the professionals. Just finding them isn't good enough. You want people that you actually trust. Trust is a big thing, especially with parents. Having a parent, so Joe is a parent with 2 children, and having them vet them as well. Like, parents have to vet childcare day in, day out. So they are like, they've got a gut of like parenting things. I don't have that. Let the parents deal with that. Also meet these people in person, because talking to someone online and talking to someone offline is a completely different experience. I'm sure you have all experienced this before. Sometimes it's similar, a lot of the time it's different. Get testimonials and follow through with them, because people can make up testimonials. We all know this. We all make fake data for our websites when we're doing things. I work in an agency, that's why I do that. Encourage attendees to check it out as well. So on the day, WordCamp London 2016 was the first year that we actually did this. And we sent out a survey asking people if they would be interested, partly because I wanted to hope that we needed a bigger room, and it was all about size of the room. Fun fact, in the UK, a child needs a certain amount of space per, a room space per child. It's quite fun. It's kind of like cattle. It's really weird. I've learned so much. But what we found when we did the survey was parents weren't very keen on using the childcare service because they didn't know who it was, what to expect, what kind of things would be there. They didn't know, what would be provided. So in year 0, as we called it, we asked the creche service if it would be okay if parents came along and checked the space out, especially when any children were not there. We only had 1 registered child for the creche. So it was £2,000 of childcare for 1 child. Best childcare ever. But what it meant was that at the end of the conference, we declared that we would be using the same childcare service for the next year, for 2017. And by doing that, it meant there was continuality. Is that a word? I think it's a word. So by doing that, it allows people to feel at ease about using your childcare service. When you're changing childcare service all the time, they don't know what to expect. So by setting a standard and saying, this is what we have, we've had a good experience with them, you've all checked it out, we would love to see more children in there so we can grow this and make this a thing that is consistently in our event. It gives people trust. It makes them trust you. And also, pretty much all the parents have direct numbers to this creche service now, so it's great. They can just ask them directly any questions they have. Obviously, when it comes to 2017, we are going to re-vet them. We are going to go through the whole process again, because things can change within a company, so you need to do this year on year. Don't just assume what happened last year means what happens next year will be the same. You still just want to make sure you sanity check things. Space planning. Now, in the UK, we're pretty lucky. I know I'm not in the UK, but in the UK, and I think in a lot of places across the world, when you have spaces like open public spaces, we're quite lucky in the sense that certain things are required by law. Wheelchair access is required by law in lots of places, especially if you're an open space. Not that I know, not that everywhere has decent wheelchair accessibility, so make sure you check that out and just walk around and make sure that is actually working. Also, hearing loops. We're pretty lucky at WordCamp London. We actually hold our event at a university, so all our theatres have hearing loops. But there is a thing called technology. And technology has this lovely way of breaking on the day you need it. So make sure you check it as like early as possible and also as late as possible. So the day before your event, and also even on the day and the first thing in the morning, making sure these things work. Just because technology. And I don't trust universities and their technology, simply. But there are other things as well when it comes to space planning that we can do. And if you're lucky and you have the space and capacity, you can do these things. Multi-faith rooms. If you're looking at universities especially, or places which have hotels and airports, surprisingly in certain countries they use airport facilities to host events, which is really cool. If they have large amounts of people going in and out of these spaces, they are likely to have a multi-faith room. So ask, and if there isn't a multi-faith room already set up in the vicinity of the venue, then just set aside a private room, call it a multi-faith room, and tell people about it. Now, when you do this, and especially if you're making a makeshift multi-faith room, when you inform people that you're having a multi-faith room and it's a facility for them to use, tell them that it is a makeshift private room so they know to bring their equipment with them. That's really, really important for certain religions. If you don't have the facility for a multi-faith room, one thing you can do is find the local religious buildings around the area and point them out. Because sometimes all it takes is 5 minutes for them to run to their faith building and then come back, and that will solve that problem. So if they know where they are, it's a great, helpful resource to them. And that doesn't mean that you have to do anything except for put some content on your website. Lactation room. There is no point of having a creche if you're not going to actually look after the parents too. One thing we did last year was put the lactation room in a different part of like the corridor instead of putting it next door, and we had the childcare creche next to the green room, which was such a bad idea. So, pro tip, put the lactation room as close to the creche as possible, but also in a lactation room, all you really need is a table, a chair, that will be nice for someone to sit down on, but also some bottles of water and tissues. Usually, the 500 milliliter bottles of water, apparently, I don't know, but apparently lactation takes a lot of liquid and they need to replenish themselves, so it's quite useful. Also, the reason why you have bottles of water and not a jug with glasses is because mothers will use the bottle to drink the water from, and then actually, because it's a sterilized bottle, to then use to put the milk in. So that's really, really handy, especially if they don't realize how much they need and stuff like that, or they need to run around finding this stuff. Just have it there for them. I tend to go for the 500 millimeter Buxton waters because they apparently are the perfect size. I get this from good sources, which are basically my colleagues. And also tissues, because I can imagine it being messy, so I just put tissues in there. In fact, putting tissues all over your conference, wherever you think someone might cry or need to blow their nose, is really, really cool, because I always find myself without tissues. Also have a quiet room. My other half, bless him, is the complete opposite of me. And as you meet me today, you'll understand what I mean. And one of the things we did was we went to FOSDEM in Brussels 2 years ago. And it's crazy. It's like thousands of people everywhere. And I've never really felt like an introvert, but that was the one day I understood what my other half goes through day in, day out. When you have crowds and crowds of people, and you're just like, give me somewhere to hide and to get my breath back. Luckily, FOSDEM did have a quiet room. I managed to find it. It wasn't well signed, but that's a different topic. Having a quiet room, it's kind of like the quiet carriage in trains, where everyone is not allowed on their phones and you don't make too much noise. Really, really helps for people who just need to take 5 minutes to get themselves back together. And it's not just for introverts. Extroverts also have a bit of introvertsy in them, so they also appreciate it. It's also a really good place to go and run and hide when you just don't want to talk to anyone, because if someone tries to talk to you, you just point at the fact it's a quiet room, and then you just can't talk to them. Every trick in the book today. Green rooms. For speakers, having somewhere to go and panic about their talks is a must, as far as I'm concerned, because otherwise I'm very, very rude before my talks. Sprint rooms, for people who want to have to do work, but not have people constantly barging in, going, what are you doing? It's kind of nice. It's not necessary, but it's just nice making all these things, because especially at tech conferences, when people are on call, they still want to come to your event, but they can't guarantee that they can be there full time. Being on call, making sure they have a phone with them, so if anything does happen, they can just run to the sprint room and get on with the job. It's kind of nice and handy for them. Media room for anyone do media. Breakout spaces, just so that you can mingle and talk and feel like you don't have to be in the main tracks when necessary. I should have pointed out, WordCamp London is 660 people, so that's why a lot of these things are for big events. Overflow areas, super important. Don't plant anything in them. People will naturally do things and organically use them, which is kind of handy. Signage. We spent a lot of money on signage, 3,500. In fact, now I realize it, this is more money than this daycare. Partly because it was all done within 48 hours, and then put on a motorbike and then expressed across London for us. Pro tip, do this beforehand, as in lots of months beforehand, and it would probably cost a lot cheaper, but it was worth every penny. Signage is one of those things you shouldn't really skimp on. Here's a picture of the signage, of some of it. It really builds an atmosphere for your event. So the lunch hall has 5 or 6 meter ceilings. It's insanely tall. It's one of those old gym buildings, so the ceiling's just crazy high. So what we did was we spent £100 on bunting and lowered the concept of the ceiling down so it just felt more homely and a bit nicer and a better atmosphere for everyone. And also, it enables self-support. You will need more signage than you think. Just trust me on that. It's really important for people, especially autistic people, to have that self-support. They don't want to be asking you questions every 2 seconds. And trust me, your volunteers don't want to be answering the questions every 2 seconds either. So having clear signage of where things are means that they can know where they are all the time. Also, if you turn a corner and you can't see any signage, you probably need signage there. Make sure you brand them, because branding is really important. I was recently at the UN. I did not know which signage was for which event, so please brand them. Make them bright and eye-catching, because that way your eye immediately sees it, because that's really, really helpful and actually lowers the amount of time you start panicking. Use a reading-friendly font. If you look at the 2016 WordCamp site, it's really, really bad for anyone with any dyslexia, because the font that we picked by the designer is not reading friendly. We know this is a problem. Please don't do what we did. Use a reading friendly font. If you're not sure what that means, Google it, because it's a whole entire talk completely. When you're walking around an event, whenever you think it's going to be A4 size that you need, just make sure that it's A3 instead, because when you have people, it just needs to be bigger. Also make the actual text bigger as well, because there's people like me who have really, really short-sightedness, and it's really, really handy to be able to read something across the room, especially when you're in a crowd. Hang above head level. Not everybody is 6 foot, and I'm 5'2", so I totally understand what this means. So hang it basically above there, and if someone can only reach the bottom, then you've got it about right. Signage takes up more time than you realize to put up. I mean, it probably took us about 3 hours, and I counted for an hour to do this signage, to put it up. So just be careful of that as well. Pre-organize the signage to make it easier. Make sure you have some blank signage. Some chisel tip marker pens to be able to write on the actual blank signage. And make sure your volunteers have a t-shirt, because especially in big events, you just can't see who it is that you're meant to go and bother, and you don't feel bad asking every other person. I've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes to go through the rest. This is going to go a bit quicker, I'm sorry. I'm going to try not waffle too much. Scheduling. I really, really hate it, especially at big multi-track events when they do 5-minute turnovers. I have an ankle injury that's reoccurring, and I was in Vienna. It was 2,000 odd people, 3 rooms, 2 different buildings, and scorching hot heats. I could not get from one building to the other within under 5 minutes without injuring myself. In fact, I did end up re-injuring myself, and it was a pain.